Joining us now, live from New York, Liz Peek. You can follow Liz on Twitter at Liz Peek. How is that? Also, you can read her in the Financial Times, or you can go to lizpeek.com. Liz, good morning.
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, especially on short notice. I love impromptu get-togethers. Very impressive of you, Liz. And let's get to a couple things. ABC Washington Post poll comes out today. Unfavorable ratings. It's like a number that you can't even fathom. So unfavorable for Clinton, highest ever for any candidate until I give you the second number. And that was 55% unfavorable to Clinton, 43% favorable. She's underwater. Under normal circumstances, you'd be like, well, she just can't win. Then you get to Trump, and after the tough 2 weeks he's had with some ill-advised comments about that particular judge, unfavorable 70%, favorable 30%, 40 points underwater, Liz.
Yeah.
I had to read the thing 2 times to be sure that I wasn't, because I do have dyslexia. I'm like, well, maybe I transposed these numbers. I didn't. I mean, how do you overcome, first of all, how can you even be at 70% on approval? That's almost impossible.
Well, yes and no. It's not impossible if every news organization in the country is hammering you on the head, and including people of your own party. So that it is interesting to me that this issue with the judge really appeared to have been a trigger for all the hostility that's been pent up about Donald Trump for months, arguably, in the Republican Party. So you had everybody, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, all these people, Mark Kirk, of course, completely disavowing him, everybody stepping away from him. And the thing, everyone is pushing Donald Trump to rein it in. Now that we are past the primaries, where arguably a very vocal and supportive group loved all the bullying, vulgarity, insults, outlandish speak, now we really actually have to have Donald Trump sound like somebody that people can imagine in the Oval Office. And clearly he's having a pretty hard time pivoting to that kind of demeanor. And so, what's really unhappy about this, if you are someone who does not want Hillary Clinton in the Oval Office, is that Donald Trump had 2 extraordinary opportunities to improve his standing. First, with the terrible jobs report that came out for May, when only 38,000 jobs were created. And Donald Trump basically spent the entire weekend fending off charges that he was a bigot because of the judge issue, instead of talking about jobs and the weak economy. And then more recently, we've had a terror attack, which most people felt, boy, instantly that's going to move the needle in Donald Trump's favor. And yet he finds himself again in hot water for injudicious comments about Muslims, et cetera. So, look, he's not a stupid guy, but he really has got to sort of start paying attention to what his advisors, I know, are telling him, which is that he's just too out there. He cannot continue this way.
Well, look, and I think you really nailed this, Liz, because he squandered 2 weeks talking about things that nobody cares about, that they're basically meaningless fodder, instead of concentrating on things that were handed to him on a silver platter. I thought his political instincts were a little better than this, and I'm going to just be honest, because when that jobs report came out, I would have thought that they would have stopped anything they had planned or doing to say and just focused on that, because that's what people care about.
Yeah, that's his big issue.
That's his big issue.
He was, that is his big issue, and possibly secondarily security and terrorism and immigration. But, really, I think Republicans are increasingly just panicked that this guy isn't going to get it, and that he is not going to be the person that can rally the party. And so something has to change.
Yes, and the other thing I don't think they've quite, or Mr. Trump is quite grasped here in this, what you call pivot time, is that now that he's the nominee, every single thing that he says is scrutinized by a very, very hostile press. Everything. And so he could come to these rallies and he could banter about like in a very friendly atmosphere and rile people up and say things off the cuff like he did yesterday. Hey, we brought bags of money into Iraq. Whatever happened to that? I'd like to see, who was taking care of it. Now, look, anybody that really covered this, Liz, like I did, and I talked to in my career, lots of military officials when Brenner was there, and they were basically coming in on helicopters with millions and millions of dollars, cash wrapped up, small bills. A lot of that money disappeared. No one knows where that went. Some is accounted for, some isn't. It's kind of part of the process. But it has nothing to do with the issues today.
I agree.
And so
I agree.
even though I happen to believe that whole Brenner thing and the money they were flying in and giving to the various leaders, and some of it was missing and nobody found it. Look, that was 20 years ago, all right? Nobody cares. It's gone.
Well, and as you point out, the real tragedy here is that he continues to step on himself and have these sort of red herrings that dominate the news cycle because, and you say, the press is hostile. So when he starts excluding the Washington Post from press events and things like that, that's what's going to be on the front page. It's not going to be, well, gosh, he actually has been open to gun control in a way that other Republican candidates aren't, or whatever. That ends up buried in the back because basically no one is going to treat this man, I was going to say fairly. I don't know if it's fair or unfair, but no one is actually going to deal with him as a real candidate.
Good to have you, Liz.
My pleasure.
Always a
Thanks
pleasure.
for having me on, always.
All right.